I'm Catherine, 28, female. I live in a city that never sleeps, in a small but sunlit apartment that I've filled with plants and books. For the past 5 years, my world has been carved out by algorithms and analytics as an SEO specialist, a job I genuinely love. It's a world of logic, patterns, and predictable outcomes, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos that was about to detonate my life. My boyfriend, Alex, an architect with a kind heart and a brilliant mind, was my safe harbor, the one beautifully unpredictable element I cherished. But I was about to discover that the calm waters of our life together concealed a reef sharp enough to tear everything apart, all because his father decided I wasn't good enough. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Chapter 1. An invitation to the lion's den. The invitation arrived not as a text or a casual call, but as a thick, cream-colored cardstock in a linen envelope. It felt less like an invitation to dinner and more like a summons. Isabella, Alex's mother, had handwriting that looked like a calligraphy font, each loop and curl perfected. An intimate dinner to celebrate Alex's recent award. It read, "My stomach did a nervous flip." I had been dating Alex for nearly 2 years, and while I had met his parents, Robert and Isabella, on a handful of occasions, each encounter felt like an audition. They were polite, impeccably so, but with a cool reserve that kept me at a distance. They were old money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted, and their world of charity galas, surgical prestige, and architectural legacies was light, years away from my middle-class upbringing. Alex, bless his heart, was completely oblivious to the undercurrents. "Isn't this great?" he said, beaming as he read the invitation over my shoulder. "Dad's finally coming around. He was so impressed when I told him about your latest project's success. He loves ambition." I wanted to believe him. I truly did. Robert was the chief of surgery at the city's most prestigious hospital, a man whose reputation preceded him like a motorcade. He was charismatic, powerful, and carried an air of authority that could make anyone feel small. Isabella, his wife, was the velvet glove over his iron fist, elegant, poised, and the director of a major charitable foundation. They were a power couple in every sense of the word, and I was just Catherine, the girl who helped websites rank higher on Google. The week leading up to the dinner was a blur of anxiety. I spent hours trying to find the perfect outfit, something that was sophisticated but not stuffy, respectful but not sycophantic. I finally settled on a simple deep blue silk dress, elegant but understated. I rehearsed conversation topics in my head, boning up on current events, art exhibits, and even recent advancements in surgical technology. I wanted to be prepared. I wanted them to see me as more than just their son's girlfriend. I wanted them to see me as an equal. When Saturday evening arrived, Alex picked me up, looking effortlessly handsome in a tailored blazer. He squeezed my hand as we drove towards the affluent suburb where his parents lived. "Hey, you seem nervous," he said, his brow furrowing with concern. "Don't be. They're going to love you. I love you, and that's all that matters." His words were a temporary balm. The moment we pulled into the long, winding driveway of his parents' estate, the anxiety returned with a vengeance. Their house wasn't just a house, it was a monument to success. A sprawling, modern mansion of glass and stone, it was surrounded by meticulously manicured gardens that glowed under the soft landscape lighting. It was the kind of place you saw in magazines, not in real life. Isabella greeted us at the door, a vision in a flowing white dress, her smile perfectly polished. "Catherine, darling, you look lovely. That color is divine on you." She kissed the air beside my cheek, her expensive perfume enveloping me. Robert appeared behind her, a formidable presence in a crisp shirt and slacks. He held a glass of what I presumed was single malt scotch. "Alex, Catherine, glad you could make it." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He shook my hand, his grip firm and brief, a clear dismissal. The evening started smoothly enough. We sat on a plush velvet couch in their living room, which was decorated with abstract art and sculptures that probably cost more than my apartment. The conversation was light, skimming across safe topics like the weather, traffic, and the recent architectural award Alex had won for designing a sustainable community center. I contributed where I could, trying to sound intelligent and engaging. Alex, sensing my effort, would often turn to me and say, "Catherine was just telling me about this fascinating new algorithm," or "Catherine's company is leading the charge in digital marketing." I could see a flicker of something in Robert's eyes each time. Not interest, but something closer to clinical assessment. We moved to the dining room, a grand space with a long mahogany table that could easily seat 20. Tonight, it was set for just the four of us, which only intensified the feeling of being under a microscope. A housekeeper, silent and efficient, served the first course, a delicate seafood bisque. So, Catherine, Isabella began, her voice smooth as silk. Alex tells us you work with computers. It all sounds so technical. I'm an SEO specialist, I explained, trying to simplify it. I help businesses improve their visibility online. Essentially, I ensure that when people search for a service or product, my client's website is one of the first things they see. Robert dabbed his mouth with a linen napkin. So, you manipulate the internet, he stated, not as a question, but as a judgment. I felt a flush of heat rise to my cheeks. Not exactly. It's more about understanding the system and making a website as user-friendly and authoritative as possible. It's about strategy and analytics. He took a slow sip of his wine, his gaze unwavering. Strategy, I see, it must be a comfortable living. The condescension was palpable. He said comfortable, like it was a dirty word, as if my entire career and financial standing could be summed up and dismissed in one breath. Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Dad, what Catherine does is incredibly complex. She's one of the best in her field. Robert just hummed, a low, dismissive sound in the back of his throat. He then turned his full attention back to Alex, effectively cutting me out of the conversation. For the rest of the meal, he and Isabella spoke only to their son, discussing family trusts, upcoming charity auctions, and mutual friends I had never heard of. I sat in silence, pushing my perfectly cooked filet mignon around my plate, my appetite gone. I felt invisible, like a piece of furniture they were forced to accommodate. The grand dining room began to feel suffocating, the walls closing in. The perfect dinner was anything but. It was a clear, calculated message. I didn't belong. Chapter 2. The mask slips the main course was cleared away, and a decadent chocolate lava cake was served for dessert. Throughout the meal, I had tried to remain composed, smiling politely and laughing at the appropriate moments, even when the conversation flowed around me as if I wasn't there. I clung to the hope that this was just their way, a kind of unintentional social awkwardness born from living in an insulated world. I hoped that once the formal dinner was over, perhaps things would relax. I was wrong. The worst was yet to come. As the housekeeper poured the coffee, Isabella turned to me with a smile that seemed almost predatory. Catherine, I've been meaning to ask, she began, her tone deceptively sweet. You and Alex seem quite serious. Have you discussed the future, marriage, children, all of that? The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. I glanced at Alex, who looked just as surprised by the directness of the question. We're very happy, I said carefully, choosing my words. We've talked about it, of course. We're on the same page about wanting a future together. Robert let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a sound of amusement. It was a sound of derision. He set his coffee cup down with a deliberate clatter. A future, he repeated, savoring the word as if it were a joke. He leaned forward, his elbows on the polished table, and pinned me with a stare so cold it felt like a physical blow. Let me be perfectly clear, young lady. The room went silent. Even the soft classical music playing in the background seemed to fade away. My son comes from a legacy, Robert said, his voice low and menacing. Our family has built its name over generations. We are surgeons, architects, philanthropists. We have a reputation to uphold, a certain standard. Alex understands this. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. He needs a partner who complements that, someone with the right background, the right pedigree. My heart started pounding in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I knew what was coming. Dad, stop, Alex said, his voice tight with anger. What are you doing? Robert ignored him, his eyes still locked on me. I've done my research on you, Catherine. A public university, a scholarship student. Your father was a mechanic, your mother a schoolteacher. Honorable professions, I suppose, for their station, but it's not our world. He gestured around the opulent room. This is not your world. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot and shameful. I felt stripped bare, my entire life reduced to a balance sheet and found wanting. Robert, that's enough, Isabella murmured, though there was no real force behind her words. She placed a hand on his arm, a token gesture of restraint, but he wasn't finished. He leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that was meant for me alone, but was loud enough for the whole table to hear. You can put on a nice dress and pretend, but you can't fake class. To people like us, you'll always be what you are, street garbage trying to climb its way out of the gutter. The words hit me with the force of a physical assault. Street garbage, the phrase echoed in the cavernous silence of the room. It was so vile, so filled with unadulterated contempt, that it stole the air from my lungs. I looked at Alex, my vision blurring with tears. He was pale, his jaw clenched, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fury. He shot up from his chair, his fists clenched. How dare you? He seethed at his father. How dare you speak to her like that in our home? Your home? Robert scoffed, leaning back in his chair, completely unfazed. This is my home, and in my home I speak the truth. I will not stand by and watch you throw away your future on some social climbing nobody. The argument exploded. Alex and Robert's voices rose, a furious torrent of accusations and recriminations. Isabella just sat there, her face a mask of practiced calm, as if this were just a minor squall that would soon pass. But I barely heard them. I was trapped in the echo of those two words, street garbage. All my achievements, my hard work, my entire sense of self-worth had been incinerated by his cruel, calculated venom. I stood up, my legs trembling. I couldn't stay there another second. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the dining room, grabbing my purse from the entryway. "Catherine, wait." Alex called after me, his voice filled with desperation. I didn't stop. I walked out the massive front door and into the cool night air, gasping for breath as if I had been underwater. I didn't have my car, so I just started walking down the long, dark driveway, my heels sinking into the gravel. The tears I had been holding back finally broke free, streaming down my face in hot, silent tracks. A few moments later, Alex's car screeched to a halt beside me. He jumped out, his face etched with pain and regret. "Cat, please," he begged, grabbing my arm gently. "Get in the car. Please, I am so sorry. I had no idea he would. I never." I pulled my arm away, shaking my head. "He meant it, Alex," I whispered, my voice raw, every single word. "He's an arrogant monster." Alex said, his own voice cracking. "He's wrong. None of what he said is true." But the damage was done. The mask had slipped, revealing the ugly, rotten prejudice that lay beneath their polished exterior. It wasn't just about my background, it was about my perceived worthlessness in their eyes. And the most painful part was that Alex, the man I loved, had brought me into the lion's den completely unprepared. He had seen his parents as flawed but ultimately decent people. I now saw them for what they truly were. Chapter 3. The aftershock and the alliance the car ride back to my apartment was thick with a suffocating silence. Alex drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He kept glancing over at me, his face a canvas of misery and helplessness. I just stared out the window at the blurred city lights, replaying Robert's words over and over in my head. Street garbage. The phrase was a brand seared into my mind. Each time I thought of it, a fresh wave of humiliation washed over me. When we reached my building, Alex parked the car but made no move to get out. "Cat," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Please talk to me, yell at me, hit me. Anything is better than this silence." I turned to look at him, my eyes feeling dry and swollen. "What is there to say, Alex? Your father despises me. He thinks I'm trash, and your mother just sat there and let him. They're wrong," he insisted, his voice pleading. "What he said has nothing to do with you and everything to do with his own bigotry and control issues. I will never forgive him for this. We don't have to see them again. We can cut them off. We can move away, whatever you want." I appreciated his words, his fierce loyalty in that moment, but a seed of doubt had been planted. "He's your father, Alex. This isn't just about me anymore. This is about your family, your legacy, as he so kindly pointed out. Are you really ready to throw all of that away? You're my family." He said immediately, reaching for my hand, "You are my future, not him." I let him hold my hand, but I felt a new, unfamiliar distance between us. It wasn't his fault, not directly, but he was a product of that world, of that family. For 2 years, I had believed our love was enough to bridge the gap between our different worlds. Now, I saw that gap for what it was. Not a gap, but a chasm, with his father standing on the other side, ready to kick me back down if I ever tried to cross. I spent the next 2 days in a fog. I called in sick to work, something I never do. I couldn't face people. I couldn't face the world. I felt tainted, judged, and fundamentally unworthy. Alex was a constant presence, bringing me food I didn't eat, trying to talk to me when I had no words. He was trying so hard to fix things, but this was a wound too deep for apologies to heal. On the 3rd day, my phone buzzed with a text from my friend and colleague, Chloe. "Hey, haven't seen you online. Everything okay?" I hesitated, then texted back, "Not really. Can you talk?" 30 minutes later, she was at my door with 2 large coffees and a bag of pastries. Chloe was my work wife, my confidante, and one of the sharpest people I knew. She took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a hug. "Okay," she said, leading me to the couch. "Spill. What happened?" And so I told her everything, the pretentious invitation, the condescending questions, and the final, brutal verbal assault. As I recounted Robert's words, the shame and anger came rushing back, and I started to cry all over again. Chloe listened patiently, her expression growing harder with every detail. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, her eyes narrowed in thought. She wasn't the type for platitudes or empty reassurances. She was a problem solver. "That man," she said finally, her voice dangerously calm, "is not just an elitist pig. He's a bully, and bullies, especially rich and powerful ones, have one thing in common. They believe they are untouchable." "He is untouchable," I said miserably. "He's the chief of surgery at University General. He's a pillar of the community. What can I possibly do?" "You're looking at this wrong," Chloe said, leaning forward, her eyes glinting. "You're thinking like a victim. You need to think like an SEO specialist. What do we do every single day?" I sniffled, wiping my eyes. "We analyze data. We find weaknesses. We build a strategy to outrank the competition." "Exactly," she said, a slow, determined smile spreading across her face. "His reputation is his most valuable asset. It's his brand, and right now, that brand is pristine. He has a perfect online presence, I'm sure. Glowing hospital reviews, articles about his philanthropy, society photos with his lovely wife." She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "Let's see, Dr. Robert Miller, Chief of Surgery. Yep, just as I thought. Page 1 of Google is a shrine to his greatness, top surgeon of the year. Dr. Miller leads groundbreaking new procedure. The Miller Foundation Gala raises record funds." She looked up at me, her smile turning sharp. "Every fortress has a crack in its walls, Cat. His digital fortress is no exception. He attacked your identity, your background, your worth. So what are we going to do?" A flicker of something other than pain sparked within me. It was a tiny, dangerous ember of an idea. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we do what we do best," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We don't get mad, we get strategic. We're not going to slander him or make up lies. We're going to do some digging. We're going to find the truth he has so carefully buried, and we are going to optimize it. We are going to take control of his narrative when people search for Dr. Robert Miller. We'll make sure they see more than just the polished facade. We'll make sure they see the truth." It was a terrifying thought, but it was also empowering. The idea of using my professional skills, the very thing he had belittled, to dismantle his carefully constructed public image was a form of justice so poetic it made my head spin. For the first time in days, the fog of despair began to lift, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. "Are you in?" Chloe asked, her eyes searching mine. I thought about his sneering face, the disgust in his eyes. I thought about the pain he had inflicted so casually, so cruelly. He had called me garbage. He had tried to throw me away. He had underestimated me. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady. "Let's cancel his reputation." Chapter 4. Digging for digital skeletons. Our first step was reconnaissance. For the next week, Chloe and I turned my apartment into a digital war room. Laptops covered every surface, and a large whiteboard was soon filled with a complex web of search queries, keywords, and potential leads. We approached this not as a revenge plot, but as a high-stakes SEO project. Our target, the online reputation of Dr. Robert Miller. The goal, to ensure that any negative but factual information about him ranked as highly as his self-promoted accolades. We divided the labor. Chloe, a content strategist, focused on the human angle. She scoured social media, forums, and local news archives, looking for any whispers of discontent. I, the SEO specialist, focused on the technical side, analyzing his digital footprint, backlink profiles, and searching for cracks in his online armor. Initially, it was discouraging. Robert's online presence was, as Chloe had predicted, a fortress. His PR team was good. Every search result on the first 5 pages of Google was positive. The hospital's website hailed him as a pioneer. His foundation's website painted him as a saint. News articles praised his surgical skill and charitable contributions. It was a masterclass in reputation management. "This guy is squeaky clean," Chloe muttered on day 3, scrolling through endless photos of Robert and Isabella smiling at blacked eye events. No disgruntled employees, no public scandals. It's like he's a robot. No one's a robot. I said, my eyes glued to a screen of code. There's always something. We just haven't found the right keyword yet. And my first breakthrough came from an unexpected place, the public archives of legal records. I ran a search for his name in civil court databases, not expecting to find much, but there it was, a malpractice lawsuit filed 7 years ago. It had been settled out of court and sealed. The details were sparse, but the plaintiff's name was listed. A quick search of her name yielded nothing. She had virtually no online presence, but the name of her lawyer was also listed. A small, independent practitioner. I started digging into the lawyer, and that's when I found a tiny crack. On a little-known legal blog from 6 years ago, the lawyer had written a vague post about the challenges of taking on untouchable doctors backed by powerful hospitals. He never mentioned Robert by name, but the timeline matched. In the comments section, a user with an anonymous handle had replied, "They cover up their mistakes with money and NDA. My sister was a nurse at University General. The stories she told. It was a breadcrumb, but it was the first one we'd found." While I followed that thread, Chloe was deep, diving into hospital review sites. Most of the reviews for Robert were 5 stars, but she was using advanced search operators to filter for negative keywords, looking for reviews that had been deleted or buried. She found a few, most of them complaining about his terrible bedside manner and arrogance. But then she found a string of comments on a third-party medical forum. They were from several years ago, posted by nurses, all anonymous. They all told a similar story. Dr. Miller was a tyrant in the operating room. He was known for berating residents, yelling at nurses, and creating a toxic, high-stress environment. One post was particularly chilling. It described an incident where his verbal abuse of a junior surgeon allegedly caused a critical error during a procedure. The post claimed the hospital's administration had buried the incident to protect their star surgeon. "We have a pattern," Chloe said, her voice electric with excitement, arrogance, bullying, and a potential cover-up. "This is more than just him being a jerk at dinner. The final piece of the puzzle came from me." I had been analyzing the backlink profile of the hospital's foundation website. It was mostly what you'd expect, links from news sites, other charities, and corporate sponsors, but one link stood out. It was from a small, local construction company's blog. The post was a generic thank you for the foundation's work. It was an insignificant link, but it was odd. Why would this small company be a focus? I dug into the construction company. Its owner was a man named David Chen. I referenced his name with Robert's, nothing, but then I looked at the foundation's list of corporate donors. Chen's company was listed as a gold tier sponsor, having donated a significant amount of money 5 years prior. That was strange for such a small firm. I then searched for the foundation's building permits for their new wing, which had been completed 4 years ago. And there it was. The contractor for the multi-million-dollar project was David Chen's company. "Chloe, look at this," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Robert's foundation awarded a massive, non-competitive contract to a major donor. It's a clear conflict of interest. It might even be illegal. We now had 3 distinct narratives, 3 significant skeletons in Robert's digital closet. A sealed malpractice suit with whispers of a cover-up, a pattern of workplace abuse from anonymous medical staff, and a blatant case of cronyism within his own charity. None of these stories were on page 1 of Google. In fact, they were practically invisible. Our mission was now clear. We weren't going to create new content. We were going to amplify the truth. We would take these buried stories, and using every SEO technique I knew, we would make them visible. We would give them the ranking they deserved. The architect of chaos was about to have his own foundations rocked. Chapter 5, The Architect of Chaos. With our ammunition gathered, it was time to build the weapon. Our strategy had to be precise, methodical, and untraceable. This wasn't about a quick, messy attack. It was about a slow, deliberate re-engineering of Robert's digital reality. We were going to be architects of a different kind of structure, one built on keywords, backlinks, and carefully optimized content that would dismantle his pristine reputation. Our plan had 3 core components. 1. Content resurrection and amplification. We couldn't just create a Robert Miller is a bad guy website. That would be obvious and easily dismissed as slander. Instead, we needed to work with the existing buried content. Chloe's first task was to take the anonymous nurse's comments from the medical forum. She created a long, detailed blog post on a new, anonymous blog we set up under a generic wellness-focused name. The post was titled, "The Hidden Stress Epidemic, When Surgeon Egos Create Toxic or Environments." It was a well-researched professional piece about the problem of surgeon bullying nationwide. Woven into the article as case studies were the verbatim, anonymous stories about Robert Miller's behavior. We never explicitly said Dr. Miller is a bully. We just presented the evidence and let the reader connect the dots. The key was embedding long, tail keywords throughout the article like Dr. Robert Miller bedside manner, University General Hospital surgery complaints, and surgeon workplace abuse, and next the malpractice suit. Since the records were sealed, we couldn't discuss the specifics, but the existence of the suit was public record. I wrote a dry, factual article for a legal commentary blog we created. The title was The Power of Sealed Settlements in Medical Malpractice Suits. It was an academic-style piece, but it used the Robert Miller case as its central example, mentioning his name, the hospital, and the date of the suit. It was all factual, all public information, and therefore legally untouchable. 2. Strategic link building the Digital Whisper campaign. Content is nothing without authority, and authority on the web is built through backlinks. This was my domain. I began what I called the Digital Whisper campaign. I started by leaving comments on high-traffic articles about medical ethics, surgery, and hospital management. The comments were thoughtful and added to the discussion, but would always contain a non-spammy link back to our new blog posts. For example, on an article about patient safety, I might write, "This is such an important topic. The psychological state of the surgical team is a huge factor. There is a concerning trend of workplace stress in ORs, as detailed in this analysis," followed by a link to Chloe's article. I also reached out to small, independent medical journalists and bloggers. Posing as a concerned medical student, I would email them saying, "I'm doing a research project on hospital accountability and came across these forum discussions and this legal case concerning a prominent surgeon. It seems like a story worth looking into." I never pushed, I just planted seeds. A few of them started sniffing around the edges of the story. 3. Search engine domination, the keyword coup. This was the final, most crucial phase. I needed to make our content rank. I used every white hat SEO trick in my arsenal. I optimized the site speed of our blogs, created a clean internal linking structure, and generated an XML sitemap submitted directly to Google. My primary target was the people also ask, feature on Google's search results page. I researched the most common questions people ask about surgeons and hospitals. Then, Chloe and I created a Q&A style page on one of our blogs that answered these questions, subtly weaving in Robert's name. For example, Q, how do you find out if a surgeon has malpractice suits? A, you can check public court records. For example, a search for Dr. Robert Miller at University General reveals a settled suit in 2018. I also focused on image and video SEO. We created a simple infographic titled 5 Signs of a Toxic Hospital Work Environment, using details from the nurses' stories. We uploaded it to Pinterest and Flickr, optimizing the file name and alt. Text with Robert Miller and University General. We even made a simple text-based YouTube video that scrolled through the nurses' anonymous quotes with somber music, titled Voices from the or A Case Study. For 3 weeks, we worked tirelessly. We were hackers, but our code was language, and our targets were algorithms. We never did anything illegal. We never lied. We simply took the scattered, buried truths about Robert and gave them a megaphone. The first sign of success was subtle. About a month into our campaign, I set up a Google alert for Robert's name. One morning, a notification popped up. A small, local news blogger had written a piece titled, "Is University General's star surgeon a saint or a tyrant?" The article cited the anonymous nurses forum and our blog post. It was a tiny ripple, but it was a start. Then the big one, I did an incognito search for Dr. Robert Miller. The first few results were still his glowing hospital bio and foundation page, but there at the bottom of page 1 was a new entry. It was the people also ask a box, and the first question in it was, "Has Dr. Robert Miller been sued for malpractice?" I felt a jolt of pure adrenaline. We had done it. We had cracked the first page. I clicked the question, and the drop-down featured snip. It was a link to our factual, legally sound article on the sealed settlement. Chloe and I watched day by day as our carefully placed content began to climb the rankings. Our blog post on toxic or environments started appearing when people searched for reviews of the hospital's surgical department. The story about the construction contract began to get picked up by local business watchdogs after one of the journalists I'd tipped off wrote an article about it. Robert had built his reputation out of stone and steel, a monument to his own ego. We had simply changed the digital map, rerouting all roads to lead back to the skeletons he had tried so hard to bury. He had no idea who was doing it or how. He just knew that his perfect world was beginning to crumble, one search result at a time. The architect of chaos was losing control of his own blueprint. Chapter 6. A toast to consequences. The fallout wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, creeping rot. The digital whispers grew into a steady hum of online chatter. The local news blogger's article was picked up by a larger city paper, which ran a more in-depth investigation into the allegations of a toxic work environment at University General. They interviewed former nurses off the record, of course, who corroborated the stories. The article didn't name Robert as the sole problem, but it heavily implied that the issues stemmed from the top of the surgical department. The story about the conflict of interest with his foundation gained the most traction. A local television news station ran a segment on it, questioning the foundation's ethics and transparency. Suddenly, the Miller Foundation, once a beacon of philanthropy, was under a cloud of suspicion. Major donors started getting nervous. Alex was caught in the middle of the storm. He called me one evening, his voice strained. "You won't believe what's happening," he said. "The hospital's board of directors called an emergency meeting. They're launching an internal investigation into the surgery department and the foundation. They're being audited. My father is losing his mind. He's blaming it on a coordinated smear campaign by his rivals." I felt a pang of something complex. Not guilt, but a heavy sense of consequence. "How are you holding up?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "I don't know," he confessed. Part of me is watching him get what he deserves. He's treated people terribly for years. But he's still my father. It's a mess, Cat. He had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. Our secret was a wall between us, but it was a necessary one. This was my battle, not his. The tipping point came about 2 months after we launched our campaign. The hospital's internal investigation, under pressure from the negative press, must have uncovered the truth about Robert's behavior. An anonymous source leaked to the press that several senior surgeons had given testimony against him. The board of directors was cornered. Their star surgeon had become a liability. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. The hospital released a crisp corporate statement. Dr. Robert Miller will be stepping down from his position as chief of surgery and taking an extended leave of absence, effective immediately. It was a quiet, bloodless coup. There was no public firing, no dramatic showdown. He was simply erased, pushed out of the institution he had lorded over for decades. His name was removed from the hospital's website that same day. Chloe and I met for a drink that evening at a quiet bar. We raised our glasses, the clink of crystal sounding like a victory bell. To Sio, Chloe said with a grin, the great equalizer. To consequences, I replied, taking a long sip of my wine. It didn't taste as sweet as I thought it would. There was a satisfaction, yes, a deep and profound sense of justice, but there was no joy. I had taken a man's career apart, piece by piece. A cruel man, a bully, but still. The power I had wielded felt immense and terrifying. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. I opened it. The message was short and chilling. "I know it was you." It wasn't signed, but I knew instantly who it was from. Robert, how could he possibly know? I had covered my tracks perfectly. I used VPN, anonymous email addresses, everything. Then I realized he didn't know. He was guessing. He was lashing out in the dark, and he had aimed at the person he despised the most. The street garbage who had been in his house just a few months ago. It was a desperate, final attempt to intimidate me. My first instinct was fear, but then a wave of calm washed over me. I thought about what to do. I could ignore it, I could block the number, or I could confront him. I chose the latter. My hands were steady as I typed a reply. "You're right, it was me." I hit send before I could second, guess myself. A moment later, my phone rang. It was the same number. I looked at Chloe, my eyes wide. She gave me a firm nod. I answered and put the phone on speaker. "You." His voice was a low, guttural growl, filled with a rage so profound it was almost animalistic. "You little nobody, you ruined me." "No, Robert," I said, my voice as cold and steady as ice. "You ruined yourself. I just made sure the world could see it. I took the ugly truth about you and I optimized it. I used the very skills you belittled, the very internet manipulation you sneered at, to hold a mirror up to you. You don't get to destroy people and then hide behind your money and your reputation." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing heavily, the sound of a man utterly defeated. You called me street garbage. I continued, my voice unwavering. You told me I didn't belong. Well, you were right about one thing. I don't belong in a world where powerful men like you get to treat others like they are worthless. So I changed the world just a little bit. Now, when people search for your name, they won't just see the powerful surgeon. They'll see the bully. They'll see the fraud. They'll see the truth. That is your legacy now. I could hear a strangled, sputtering sound, but I didn't wait to hear what he had to say. Enjoy your retirement, Robert, I said, and I hung up. Chapter 7. The aftermath. The silence in the bar was absolute. Chloe stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. That, she said, was the most terrifying and amazing thing I have ever witnessed. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my body trembling with the adrenaline dump. I had faced the monster and I hadn't flinched. The fear I had been living with for months was finally, truly gone. In the weeks that followed, the dust began to settle. Robert and Isabella retreated from public life entirely. The foundation was restructured under new leadership. The hospital promoted a well-respected female surgeon to take Robert's place, and the internal culture reportedly began a slow process of healing. The digital world had been permanently altered. The negative stories about Robert were now firmly entrenched in the search results, a permanent stain on his name. His reputation was, for all intents and purposes, cancelled. My relationship with Alex was the most complicated piece of the aftermath. The night after the phone call, I told him everything. I laid it all out. The plan, the execution, Chloe's help, everything. I expected him to be horrified, angry, or torn. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, my whole life. He said finally, his voice thick with emotion, I watched him bully people. My mother, his colleagues, me. I was always too scared to stand up to him. I let him hurt you, and I did nothing but yell. You fought back. You did something I was never brave enough to do. He looked at me, and for the first time there was no shadow of his father in his eyes. There was only awe. I don't condone it, Kat. He said it's terrifying, but I understand it, and I love you. It wasn't an easy path. His family was shattered, and he had to navigate the fallout. He began seeing a therapist to unpack the decades of his father's emotional abuse. We took a step back, giving each other space to heal and process. We were building something new, a relationship that wasn't defined by his family's expectations or my own insecurities. We were building it on a new foundation of honesty and mutual respect. As for me, the experience changed me. I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. I had taken the worst moment of my life and turned it into a catalyst for justice. My work was no longer just about algorithms and rankings. It was about the power of information and the importance of truth. A few months later, Chloe and I decided to take our skills in a new direction. We started a small, boutique consulting firm on the side. We call it Reputation Reset. We don't engage in smear campaigns. Instead, we help the real victims of online harassment and defamation. People being bullied, slandered, or silenced by those with more power. We help them fight back using the same tools I used against Robert, but this time to restore and protect the reputations of the deserving. My life is quiet now and beautifully, wonderfully normal. Alex and I are closer than ever, our bond forged in fire. I still love my sunlit apartment, my plants, and my books. But now, when I sit down at my computer, I know that the world of logic and patterns I work in has the power to create real, tangible change. Robert wanted to define me by my background, to put me in a box labeled unworthy. He failed. I am not street garbage. I am Catherine, and I get to write my own story.